Welcome back to another episode of Read More Comics, Moore, where we decide to reinvestigate a bunch of the Alan Moore canon of comic books. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Tom Scholey.
Today, we're talking a big one, Batman the Killing Joke. Whenever I had my 1 week on the New York Times bestseller list, there were like 5 Walking Dead comics, a couple Raina Telgemeier books, my thing, and Batman Killing Joke. So it's still very popular and sells a lot to this very day.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I went into a comic book store, it was probably like a year after this came out, 88 or 89 or whatever, and plastered on the wall like were just like a million different variant copies of The Killing Joke, and it had gone through like multiple printings. It was hugely popular, like a mega hit, and yeah, like you said, still in print.
The guy on artist duties on this baby is Brian Bolland doing the heavy lifting with the pen and ink work, and we have John Higgins doing the coloring on the OG version. Once again, both of these guys come from the 2000 AD school of comic book making and cartooning. John Higgins is a pretty good pen and ink artist himself. He could draw just fine, man. Like, when I compare his work to those other guys that we do know, Gibbons, Bolland, Alan Davis, he might not stack up to them, but he could draw circles around my punk ass, man. So whenever the British invasion thing happened with like Karen Berger and Dick Giordano like going over there and like poaching their best talent, it is surprising to me that they didn't give Higgins some drawing duties too, because his drawings are really, really good, man. But really, really good isn't good enough when it comes to like a Dave Gibbons or in this case, Brian Bolland.
You know, it's funny, like the all these different Alan Moore comics we've been reading. The art's been good and whatnot, but this is like the one where like maybe the art is even better than the writing. Like the artist might be the star of this one. Like what Brian Boland's doing is so strong. Each panel is a poster, and a lot of panels have become posters and T-shirts. This is like a super iconic Batman, what he's created here.
The true business that a Marvel or a DC is in really is in licensing stuff. Like, they'll make the comics, but what is truly going on behind the scenes is if Art Adams draws a very striking Wolverine coming at the camera with a foreshortened leg that, your mom doesn't understand. Why does he have one leg? And the claws coming out. That's going on Chef Boyardee cans. There's going to be giant cardboard standees that you can buy. That's going to be on shirts and posters and all sorts of stuff. Like, that's what they're hoping we do whenever we are putting together these comic pages. You'll be able to siphon off a good image and do something with it.
When I was a kid and I was reading this comic, it was all in preparation for the 1989 Batman movie, and I had like there were tons of like bootleg Batman T-shirts and things out there, and I had like a bootleg Batman T-shirt that was like an image straight out right from this comic. It wasn't just DC that was profiting from the images in this.
Let's jump into the book.
Okay.
One of the first things that the readers will notice is that the kind of end papers, basically Moore and the creative team, they're using the entire animal when it comes to telling their story here. So the end papers begin and end with giant enlargement of the rain on the asphalt, and then it segues into the first panel of the story, and we have that 3 or 4 page silent sequence, 9-panel grid, where Batman and Gordon are entering Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, and Alan Moore talks about when he made this comic, he was in the mindset of Watchmen, and he was applying the same kind of thought as Watchmen, and so it has like the 9 panels.
What comes first?
Watchmen comes before this. Now, this is something we'll get into more as it goes on, but this comic came out years after it was written. DC in the 80s had Crisis on Infinite Earths, and they were going to after that they were going to reset their continuity. Batman was going to start again, Superman was going to start again, all these things. And so Alan Moore wrote, like the last Superman story before it would end, and then there'd be a fresh reset. So you could have a last story because we're going to reset our continuity. And so this was supposed to come out before the reset, but for whatever reason, part of it, like maybe the intensity of the artwork, the time it took, it came out after Crisis. So it went from being something that was going to happen and then be stricken from the record to being something that becomes part of DC, like Batman continuity to this day.
Brian Bolland, notoriously very, very sluggish artist, very rigorous stuff. When I look at his work, I don't want to use the word joyless, and I'm projecting that onto the artists themselves.
Right, you at the drawing table. You sitting at the drawing table.
It looks hard to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like he's having an easy go at it at all. And the rigor of these pages, I can imagine them taking a very long time. Sure. Because not only is the structural integrity of every single thing he's drawing very, very sound, but then we have like amazing lighting and shading, like in black and white line reproduction, which is not an easy thing to do, man. There's very sensitive ink line he has.
These are like, I would call these like high resolution images, like not in the sense of like high resolution, but that every like millimeter of that panel has been like thoroughly like thought about and etched to perfection. Like you can't really look anywhere within a panel and see something imperfect going on. It's really like bulletproof comics
aesthetically.
Yeah, and like you said, the joyless is like, it's joyless, for me or you if we had to sit at the drawing table and make it. But to look at, there's just these striking images that just like blow you away.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Batmobile in particular, which on these first pages, the Batmobile pulls up and it's like a Batmobile you've never seen. It's the 1940s Batmobile, but like so,
I mean, it's like almost like, is that some kind of Aston Martin body or chassis?
I mean, he took a lot of the things in this comic he took like the 1940s Batman stuff, all those weird and like those weird Dick Sprang drawings and stuff, and then just said, okay, how would that look in real life? And then like create like an actual three-dimensional object of those insane designs.
I'm going to try not to sound like a broken record when we talk about a lot of the comics that we'll be unpacking on Read More Comics, but it would be apt to bring up, especially with this story, that this is another example of Alan Moore working with an amazing drawer, an amazing illustrator, but drawing pretty pictures and telling stories with pictures, being a storyteller on a comic book page, making a comic book page, period, is a different skill set than just drawing fun-looking stuff. And Moore is a student of comics. He is a student of Harvey Kurtzman and saw what Kurtzman did with Wally Wood, saw what Kurtzman did with Bill Elder, compared to the work that Wood did with writers like Al Feldstein, where they're basically just doing more kind of like illustrated prose rather than telling a story from panel to panel. So this comic here, probably more than any others, because you could take a look at a Brian Bolland Judge Dredd page. You could take a look at Camelot 3000 even, and you see that the drawing is sound. You can't deny that. But Brian Bolland's storytelling instincts are not the strongest when it comes to like putting together the flow of an actual comic page. Alan Moore reins him in, and they tell a very, very clear story.
Well, yeah, like the Alan Moore scripts that I've read, like he's famous for this, like these exquisite detail in his description of everything that goes on. And he makes sort of the understanding with the artists he works with that like you can ignore as much of this stuff as you want or follow as much of it as you want. And Bolland seems like he's presenting like the visual equivalent of that kind of writing. His drawing is that.
His best artists do that. The best tandems of the Alan Moore creative teams do that. Where like the artists take no shorts, man, and they're getting it all in there, and it lends to some beautiful nonverbal storytelling that goes along with another story that's being told with the dialogue bubbles. And we'll see examples of that as we continue through the pages of this thing right here.
Yeah, just like these first couple pages that we're talking about, there's like you said, they're silent. There's tremendous acting going on. Like, first of all, Batman is like, looks so impressive. Like, this is like, people who are into Batman, this is what you want to see. You want to see him like striking a pose, looking badass and stuff. And then the drawing of Commissioner Gordon's face and his reaction and stuff, and then the cop standing next to him who like kind of does a double take when he sees Batman. His eyes get a little bit wide, and
so does the secretary lady out front.
Yeah, and then he comes through the door, and then there's like the guy who's in charge of guarding the door to the Joker's cage, and he must have like talked to Batman a million times. So he's just kind of like, hey, like kind of good to see, has this look of like he's like a veteran who's been through this before, and like isn't phased at all. And you have like Batman like walking towards Joker's cell, passes Harvey Dent's cell, and like the bar is like going like cuts his face in two, the bars that he's holding onto, and it's like this perfectly rendered handsome Harvey Dent face, and then this perfectly rendered Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde face, just like you're 2 pages in and you're just like blown away.
Batman sits down with Joker, who's playing some kind of solitaire or something like that, and then goes on his spiel. It's this isn't going to end well. I'm going to kill you. You're going to kill me. We're going to kill each other. Blah 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 blah. Grabs him, and then the paint rubs off.
Mm-hmm. And we're in that Watchmen cadence.
Yes.
The 9 panels, and it's like tick tock, tick tock. And so with this
Equal
it's like
rhythm.
Lift card, fnap, play card, fnap, fnap, fnap. There's like a rhythm being laid out, and it's really effective. Like he found this like mode of working that really sings, and so he's like, giving it another run through in this.
That is this comic. It is extremely well paced, and they are using Silver Age technology basically when it comes to panel structure. It's the 6-panel grid, it's the 9-panel grid, and it's very rigid within those kind of formats. I mean, I'm saying there are some bigger panels or whatever, but it's not panels inside of panels.
Yeah, diagonals and
none of that Neil Adams stuff. It's the very traditional. If it's not a Kirby page composition, it's a Ditko page composition.
Yeah, so he's like, we're gonna kill each other. One of us is gonna kill the other. Like, why are we doing this? Like let's try to figure something else out. And then like you said, he grabs his hand and like the paint rubs off, and it's like, oh, this guy's
it's not the Joker.
Not the Joker, yeah. And again, those like transitions that you talk about more. He's
we're going to bring up, because I wrote down every transition.
Right.
And this is a new episode, so we're not going to take for granted that everybody watched all the other episodes. The Alan Moore transitions are definitely something that he pays very close attention to. How do you get into one scene, into the next, man, in an elegant way without just putting the next morning in caption? And this story has probably a blend of his best transitions that he's ever figured out, and if you were curious, there's about 12, and we'll unpack them all.
The transitions are so like on the nose, that like it almost feels like Moore parodying himself. And when people sort of critique Moore and make fun of his tics and stuff, I really think they're thinking of this work specifically.
I love it.
Yeah. He's never been Moorier than he is. He's at his Mooriest in this one. And
so Batman's holding the hair.
Yeah. And Commissioner Gordon comes in and he says, don't you harm one hair on his head, to Batman, because he thinks Batman's going to kill. And then he's like, here, you can have all of it, and hands him the wig. So right there, that's not a transition, but it is like an Alan Moore style, like, joke, the making something literal.
When he hands him the hair, he, one more time, goes to the guy and is like, what did you do with him? Meaning Joker. Where is he? And the transition happens the very next page. The caption is a quote that carries on the statement. So it's like a dissolve into this next scene. And the caption is, where is he? And we see where Joker is. He is in that dilapidated, like, Coney Island type, rickety Kennywood amusement park with the little, with the strange brew Hoosier guy who's the, co-owner or whatever.
The Joker here is, like, clearly modeled on David Bowie.
Yeah.
And he's modeled on a very specific David Bowie. It's like David Bowie, Diamond Dogs era. Go on YouTube, look up David Bowie on Dick Cavett show, and your mind will be blown because it's like he's like super skinny. He's wearing kind of like this suit. He's got a cane that he's twirling, and he's like high on some like cocaine or whatever. And he's got this crazy
Allegedly.
Yeah, well, I mean he's dead now, so he can't sue it.
His wife's out there.
He's got this crazed look in his eye, and it's like he's like talking to Dick Cavett, and then occasionally he gets this smile on his face, and it is the Joker. We talked in like our Sandman stuff about David Bowie being the model. David Bowie was a huge cultural touchstone to this day, and he's the model for the Joker.
It's just it is very clear that Brian Bolland is pulling from something here, but I didn't know the reference, man. Mm-hmm. He's interested in purchasing this Coney Island amusement park. That's how he kind of like got the guy to come out there and walk the grounds. And of course, he's at his most comedic Joker, camp Joker. The rides are falling apart. This is dangerous. It looks like that'll catch on fire.
I love it.
The next transition is another just like text-based one where it's not the imagery dissolves into the next piece. Joker just says, money isn't an issue anymore. Mm-hmm. And the page after that is we're in young Joker's apartment, scenery as character.
Yeah.
It's a tiny shithole apartment. Mm-hmm. Like one of those apartments where you have to like lift the kitchen counter up and now you can take a bath in the kitchen sink.
It looks Depression
kind of place.
Era. It looks like, like the tenement that like Jack Kirby grew up in.
Yeah, super tiny.
Up until this point, we have the carnival. Like this feels like a companion piece to Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, I see.
At least at the time, it was kind of almost presented that way. That like, oh, there's a lot of like really sophisticated things going on in Batman comics right now. And just reading this as like a kid, it's like I assume like all these things sort of are all going to like hook up together. So it's like, okay, here's Joker, an early version of a Joker having his evil carnival, and then we have the the Dark Knight version of that.
When we have this like flashback sequence, and it's discovered that this young iteration of Joker is a comedian. Got his wife pregnant.
He quit his old job to become a comedian, and it's not working out. Yeah, and physically, it's almost like there are two characters. Like the Joker is one character, and then the pre-Joker Joker is another character. And like this one, it seems like he's modeled, physically modeled on Stan Laurel.
Sure. Yeah. I'll get behind that for sure. I do know that reference.
Yeah.
The flashback sequences, though, very early on, with that first one, at the very end. The wife is saying, like, I don't care if we don't have money, you're good in the sack, right? And she has that rictus, red lipstick, crazy Joker smile while she's looking at him. And it's very off character from every previous panel where we deal with her. It's a different kind of character. So it lets the reader know, at least, certainly on a rereading or whatever, that this young Joker thing, this is Patrick Bateman, the unreliable narrator of the book, where what you're reading, you can't necessarily take it seriously. Like with each of these like flashbacks, there's a little something that's a little off that can let you imagine that maybe we're not being given the whole story.
Yeah, because it's very clear that we're seeing a recollection, like he looks at like, a poster that says like, see the fat lady, and then it's like his wife pregnant, and then it's like, she's got that smile, and then he's like looking in a reflection of like a clown
in the modern day, which is another transition.
Yeah,
piece.
So it's like obviously this thing that we're reading is his recollection of this event. This whole comic kind of comes out of that idea of like sympathy for the devil or whatever. Like Moore's like trying really hard to come up with a rationale for like why someone would become so horrible a person as the Joker. Like what would it take? It's like this project that he wanted to do where he wanted to test a theory where it's like he wanted to make the Joker like such a character of pathos that like you root for and want to identify with, and then at the same time show him being as like horrible and awful as he possibly can. So like you're simultaneously like caring about him and then like being totally revulsed by him.
That's one of the things I wanted to bring up in this story, because this is a very brutal Joker. He does a lot of like truly bad things, And I don't know that it was ever explored, the character was ever explored this way in previous comics, besides Dark Knight Returns. Like, how did Neil Adams handle it? I have a couple of those comics, and it's not that big of, like, it's still pretty silly.
The Joker would kill people in some of the Neil Adams or the Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers, and Batman comics had been getting like a little bit darker prior to this. But yeah, I mean, Moore is deliberately pushing it to the limit. Make a villain that's so villainous, and that needs to be dealt with in like the most extreme ways you could.
When we flash back to the modern day in the carnival, Joker does the whole, like, let's shake on it. Let's make this business transaction. Let's shake on it. And this is a page of amazing, beautiful, nonverbal storytelling. You would have to put a lot of work into composing this sequence of panels to get it to work. We see the silhouette where Joker's hand is about to shake the guy, and you see like a little needle. You see the shake. You see him pulling off the little trick gimmick, throwing it away. It establishes the little trick gimmick because the little thumbtack thing.
Yeah, it's like a joy buzzer, but with a big needle.
Yeah. Like that'll show up later. And then as Joker walks away, we see that dude's face. He just got poisoned by the joy buzzer needle thing.
Yeah, and he's got a big smile on his face. You die, but like die with a big smile.
Yeah, and then the transition here is the big smile, dissolve, next page, it's Batman holding up a Joker card.
Yeah, we're in the Batcave
In the Batcave.
And it's like such a cool looking Batcave. And again, it's like he's taking like the 1940s, 1950s Batcave, but then like making it real, and you got a mix of like, you have cartoony drawings of like Batmite or like the Joker himself, the cartoony drawing, and then the photo, and just really incredible. The story of this is one thing, but it's just like the power of it for me was like as like a tour of Batman's world, like just like if you're into Batman, here's this like beautifully illustrated, walk through it. And this reading of The Killing Joke, this is my first time reading it since I became a professional.
Interesting.
A comics professional.
It's been a long time for me too. It like I like it. It's fine. Like to me, it's not like the most like canonical work in mainstream comics or anything. Like it's a really, really good Batman comic compared to any of the monthly joints.
Like as a kid and then as a teenager, like I read it a million times. Like I read it a bunch, but yeah, it just like it didn't stick with me. And I think a big part of that is sort of like that it's such a downer. Like the darkness of it is it's not fun to revisit in the way that like more Superman stuff is fun, It's almost like it's a story that self-destructs. Like it's every scene undercuts what happened just before it. Batman's having this like great conversation with the Joker, and then we find out it's not even the Joker anyway. So throw that out. So okay, we just had Batman have a scene with some random guy. Okay, great. And then it's like the Joker's talking to that guy and like saying like, oh, I want to buy this place, and then he's like, oh, well, actually, I already bought it, and so I'm just kind of messing with you. So then that scene means nothing. It's like this like self-destructing story.
Interesting.
So like those things aren't as interesting to revisit because you come back to it and it's like, oh, well, this is like a story where a bunch of like nothing happens.
Let's get Batman out of the Batcave.
Yeah.
And the way that Moore transitions out of that is Batman is sort of staring at the screen, pondering, how do two guys who don't even know one another hate each other so much? So it's the word hate that is what transitions and carries over into the next sequence where it's Commissioner Gordon cutting out the Joker has escaped headline or whatever it is.
Putting together his scrapbook.
And he says, I hate it. So it's the word hate that's the transition piece. It's not a visual piece like almost every other transition in this story.
Yeah, this scene is like the setup in a thriller or something where it's like this cozy, fun, jokey, domestic scene, and like something really horrible is going to happen. It's Commissioner Gordon and his daughter Barbara, who like there's no mention of her being Batgirl or whatever, but like she's Batgirl. Reading this comic, I think a lot of the people who were reading this comic in the 80s weren't necessarily people who were versed in comic books, in Batman comic books. They just knew the Adam West Batman TV show.
Yeah.
And so like all the stuff in here is stuff you'd be familiar enough with if you knew that. So then you have that setup, makes you feel nice and safe, and then the page turns, like, oh, it's my friend at the door, and then the page turns and she opens the door and it's the Joker, like, pointing a gun at her, and he's dressed in like a Panama Jack outfit or like Hawaiian shirt and stuff, pointing a gun, and then shoots her. It's like really, really brutal. Like, it's brutal by comic standards. It's really brutal by DC comic standards. I don't know that DC would make a comic like this today.
Yeah, DC's real square.
And they like extend the moment of this gunshot and her like recoiling from it. It's like several panels, and the colors are like real, like really like reds and oranges and just garish, and like it's just this really like ugly, violent moment that's in explicit detail. It's kind of like I think the influence is maybe like Brian De Palma movies.
Oh, like, yeah, Scarface and...
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of like ultra violence that was like very 80s and very new at the time.
It is probably the most brutal piece of gun violence, like, in a DC comic that I could think of.
Yeah, and like Brian De Palma, Brian De Palma would get criticized for his extreme depiction of violence, but like he would say these like nice depictions of violence are irresponsible. That I'm showing violence as what it is. It is ugly. It's uncomfortable. Like, it's not something for you to like cheer to or like get a kick out of. It's I'm showing you something very ugly so that because that's what it is. And so like I think that same logic applies here.
Just the attention to detail with the nonverbal stuff is something that I may point out a lot, like, as we continue, so just bear with me. But Commissioner Gordon, with his scrapbook, he's got the scissors in hand, and he kind of like instinctively like rushes those guys. He's got the scissors, man. They punch him right in the stomach, man, and that's a harrowing blow. Like, you could, the way Bolland draws it, like, you could tell all the wind is knocked out of him, and he drops those scissors, man.
Well, yeah, like before we transition out of this one, it's like this scene kind of reminds me of like Clockwork Orange, where he's like doing comedy, as he's like committing this assault, he's like doing comedy, and so it makes this like really strong like disorientation, like and he's making all these jokes because like she's a librarian, so he's making all these book jokes and librarian like, oh, the spine's damaged, on this volume, it's like not mint condition or whatever, these jokes that like, it's like just really ugly.
Yeah, and like the transition here with the undoing her shirt, what it fades into, like when you flip the next page, we're back now into flashback sequence, and it's basically the same pose for the Joker, but it's young Joker, and he's just picking up one of those prawns in the restaurant.
Yeah.
So it's the same pose,
yeah.
And it's like, suggesting that she's a piece of meat, or something like that, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, it's this really creepy scene.
She is the prawn, because when we fade out of this, it'll be clear.
Right. Yeah, it's like this creepy scene, and then it's like he's handling this like creepy crawly kind of stuff. This like a bowl of prawns is kind of nasty. Like maybe if you're hungry or whatever, or into it or whatever, but it's nasty. It's how detestable can I as the author make the Joker, and then how much can I the very next scene make you identify with him and like root for him and feel bad for him. Has the Joker ever been scarier than he is here? Has he ever been more, more satanic or more nihilistic? Or it's dark stuff. We're in dark territory.
And this is the part of the story where young Joker he's got to put some food on the table, man, and he's getting in league with frickin' Mario and Luigi of like the criminal syndicate or whatever, it is like Fatty and Skinny. There's like the little dude with the stash, all that, man. And they're just kind of like, seducing him a little bit, like talking him into the thing.
Yeah, it's so obvious that like there's like just manipulate, like they're just like full of it. And they're like, oh, we're your buddies. Hey, well, and oh, you'll be the one in charge. And, hats off to the dialogue,
Whenever Higgins is doing the color, and he's able to transition as well. Like the scenes from the past, they have their own set of
like
rules.
A muted palette and.
If muted is the word. It's like orange.
Okay,
it's like because the dominant colors
it's like
of this
sepia
thing, the dominant colors of this strip this book, it really is Joker colors. It's it's the secondary colors. It's green, it's purple, it's orange are the colors that he's playing with here.
Yeah, and like the color, I mean, we can get into this later about, you know, how the color was revised, you know, by Bolland, but like the color, like I'm a fan of the color in this. I think it's totally appropriate to the subject matter. It's very it's very 80s, it's very jarring, it's very intense, and like you said, they are the Joker colors.
The way that we transition out of this sequence, whenever he agrees to work with the guys, man, you know, they're still playing with these prawns, and it's a close-up of a prawn, and they're or a shrimp, whatever those things are. I'm not that bougie, man. I don't know. I've never had a shrimp that big before. They're pulling the legs off of it, dissolve into modern day, and it's a doctor holding on to Barbara Gordon's bare legs in the hospital, and basically saying like she'll never walk again. You see, like she's the
like her legs have gotten plucked off. Like
Enter Batman.
Yeah,
Bullock is there.
But yeah, the guy looks like a super schlubby cop. Like he would be like you know, Sipowicz or whatever in
right.
Like he was in a couple different Hill Street Blues, but he was in a couple different shows. But he would be like the slob cop. And this scene, this is like part of like sort of like revenge stories. This is like a scene that would be in like Billy Jack or like the Road Warrior or something, Mad Max or whatever, like where, you know, she's describing, you know, like the attack, and then like the hero is like seething, and like he's ready to like, you know, and he like has like the Joker's card in his hand or whatever, and he, you know, crumbles it up.
The transition out of the hospital room sequence is Barbara she's having some PTSD from what the hell just happened, the harrowing events that just took place. She's holding on to the cape the cape of Batman, and it's first person view. It dissolves into carnival sequence, and those little pinhead Cupid doll sadomasochist people are now undressing Commissioner Gordon. Same pose and stuff like that, but like they're taking Commissioner Gordon's shirt off. They're disrobing him.
Yeah, and it's like I guess they're like from like the movie Freaks or whatever. There's a lot of characters that are like, you know, from that movie. And like, yeah, just thinking of this as a DC comic, like just the imagery of it, like all the like leather and the like, it's like I don't remember there being stuff like that prior to this. I don't remember.
It's very British.
It's very
because it's like it's that imagery, like the Freaks. That's a very like 2000 AD set of stuff. The color palette is very much like a Brendan McCarthy kind of like candy, or like a Jamie Hewlett. You like all that, or Cam Kennedy, like just these like really poppy colors that are kind of all over the place, and they will put a purple up next to a green, and like you have to deal with it.
It kind of tells you like what high esteem they held Alan Moore in, that they were just giving him free reign
for the most part, because with this story, with the final Batman, I mean the final Superman story. What's it called?
Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
They always have to inject a piece in there where it's like hedging their bets and like letting the readers who are fucking jerking off at canon to just let them know like this is an imaginary story. It's okay. You know what I'm saying, man? Like that's so like that will come later in this. So it's like, yeah, we're gonna give you a lot of rope. But we always have to have one freaking douche piece in here to just like let everybody know, you know, don't worry. This isn't a part of
your regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really, I mean, but total corporate bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to what exactly you're referring to, because
it's one sentence that'll be in here.
Okay, Commissioner Gordon's getting like stripped and chained. He's brought before like the king, the Joker, and he's sitting atop of this. He's sitting in this sort of like John Buscema pose, like a pose that John Buscema would have like Mephisto sitting in, you know, atop his throne, and then the throne is like built on like a pile of like baby dolls,
like Cupid dolls.
Cupid dolls, yeah, and like having just recently read V for Vendetta, where Cupid dolls are like in that too. So it's this thing, and then that I think becomes like a transition too.
The transition is they put James Gordon in the pretzel car because now it's time to try to make this guy go crazy.
Yeah.
They put him in the pretzel car with the little Cupid dolls. Enter the laughing in the dark ride, man. So it's like a demon clown face.
Yeah, and I mean it's a Joker face basically.
And the door opens and then the transition is back into the flashback sequence, and it's the door to the bar and grill, and enter to like a plainclothesman and a beat cop.
Yeah.
Enter because young Joker, Stan Laurel Joker, is there with the Mario and Luigi guys. The cops come by. Can we talk to you for a second? And he's such a bundle of nerves that he thinks that they're coming to arrest him before he even did anything yet.
Yeah. I mean, they're all tightening up. Like they're at least planning a crime. Which
They're planning a crime, sure. But this is another moment, like another panel where like the overacting of it feels like unreliable, because it's like the only time you see these kind of like Will Eisner pantomime poses, it's in the flashback sequence of the unreliable narrator, and then you see like Mario and Luigi kind of like sitting like this and like very, very uncomfortable when the cop and the detective they got to give young Joker some bad news, man, and he's setting up this crime to put some food on the table for his wife and an impending child.
Yeah, and so it's a freak accident with a baby bottle heater, which is like that's an odd detail, but it's just to show like I guess like the randomness of life and death and fate or what that just that like some kind of crazy thing could happen that's like a 1,000,000-to-1 accident, and then just your life's over.
Yeah, but listen, now he doesn't have any reason to pull off a heist. Like, he doesn't have to do this anymore, man. But those goons, they don't see it that way.
Yeah, this is kind of a trope, too. Like True Romance has it, where Michael Rappaport is going to go, like, he has this, like, audition and stuff, and then he's going to go commit this crime, and then he finds out that, like, he got the audition to be on the new TJ Hooker, and then it's kind of like, well, I don't really need this heist thing, but okay, I'll do the heist with you guys, and of course he gets killed.
They assure him that whoever doesn't show up to this heist is going to get hurt.
Yeah,
and this is right after they explain the Red Hood stuff, the fact that he has to dress up in this outfit.
Yeah, which is like, this is canon. Yeah. This is like there's like an old Batman comic from like the 40s or the 50s. Yeah, and he's got the and that it's part of like the Joker's origin that he was the the Red Hood.
The transition out of this flashback into the more modern day is the final page of the flashback is young Joker. It doubles over in turmoil, and he's doing this kind of like cross
that
thing.
always stuck out to me. That pantomime that is very Eisner-esque.
Yeah, he's doing that, but then when we transition out of that, the pretzel car is now coming out of the first Hall of Horrors in the carnival. And Gordon is sitting in the pretzel car in that position with the Cupid dolls. Or no, I think it might be entering, actually. Yeah. Because the Cupid dolls are like, up, like, get your head up. Like, look up and, see the screens and junk like that.
And, like, you're in hell now. Like, you're, like, the Joker in the flashbacks has just entered hell, and now James Gordon's entering hell,
Right here, we see what happened in the hours between Barbara Gordon's initial bullet wound and when she was in the hospital. Joker's like taking naked photos of her. She is violated. She is violated by the guy, like in the most reprehensible way. And now her father is bearing witness.
Yeah, he has to
to all of this in an effort to just reduce him down to a bundle of nerves.
Yeah, or to take him down to the Joker's level.
Yeah,
make
that's
him.
That's the whole story.
Yeah,
that's the whole story. Like one bad day is enough to turn you from a commissioner of the police department into the what is it, the clown of crime?
Yeah, the clown prince of crime.
The clown prince of crime.
Yeah, it could have happened to anybody. It's just that the dice rolled one way, and it happened to the Joker.
The next sequence, we see more of these. It becomes like a series of montages, so it's not the clean transition thing that I've been describing. It's left side of the page going down, 1/9 size panel. The car just continuously is entering new doors of hell, new gates of hell, and then the right side, like the next two panels of like say the 9-panel grid, that's Batman looking for the Joker. This is it's a nonverbal piece, and it's a montage sequence that takes place over a very long period of time within these 9 panels. But if you just step back and like just like think about like the cheesiness of it, he is taking off a Joker wanted sign and showing it to people like they don't know who the fuck Joker
Yeah,
is.
have you seen this guy? Yeah. And this is like a cop TV show in the '80s. This is like Hunter or something. There'd be like a musical montage of him go, and then people shaking their head, no,
Yeah, yeah. The body language of Penguin is something I always liked, where he's just like, like get out of here.
Yeah, the Penguin's interesting because like all of these like masterful Batman stories that we talk about, these like Batman classics, Penguin never gets to star in any of them. Like Two-Face gets his moment, Joker gets his moment, but Penguin doesn't. And I mean, we could talk about that maybe some other time or whatever, or maybe here. But it's funny to me the Penguin just gets a cameo in this, which is better than his treatment in like The Dark Knight Returns.
So I mentioned that whole series of the pretzel car is going into different chambers of hell. Has to come out sometime. And it does. And that's how we get out of that montage sequence. We see like a first-person point of view. The doors open, and there is Joker outside waiting to see to assess the damage he caused James Gordon. And Gordon is pretty broken. He's very traumatized by the things he saw, man. And this is where Joker's going on a spiel about, like...
Yeah, he says, like, that's what a dose of reality does. Never touch the stuff. Which is kind of like that's like sort of like a paraphrase of like a Robin Williams joke where it's like, reality, what a concept. Like that's the sort of thing where like Robin Williams would say.
Once we get out of that sequence, it's Joker. The camera's pointing down to a puddle, and Joker has his cane, and we see the reflection of Joker in the puddle. It dissolves into the flashback sequence, and we see the Red Hood's reflection in the kind of chemical waste of that chemical plant that he used to work at before he became the comedian. He's there with those rubes, Mario and Luigi.
Who would be like the typical like Batman, like the typical guys Batman would like throw a batarang at in an old comic, just some like mustached gangster generic guys.
Immediately a security guard shows up, and they're like, what the hell, man? You said there was going to be no security. It was going to be clean and easy. And the security guy shoots at them, but also calls for backup. You know how I mentioned that there would be like an unreliable piece that happens in every one of these flashbacks? The closest unreliable piece in this sequence, because this is where the brand, like they don't even have a name for Batman yet.
Right. He's super new.
Yeah. Like he shows up, but not before the these bandits like get shot. And whenever like one guy gets shot first, and the other guy might have like be a little wounded, but he's still alive, and he's like to the Red Hood, to Joker, I'm gonna effing kill you when we get out of here or whatever. And then they both scramble as more cops show and begin shooting, and that guy gets shot to death. But like you see bullets just miss.
The Joker, pre-Joker.
Yeah. This is like in this comic, it's like the dramatized version. It's the story you would tell if you were involved in like you heard shooting or whatever, man.
Yeah, and he all this time he's got this like red dome on this red fishbowl on his head, and he like talks about how like it looks like hell, or like everything's red. It looks like and it's like he's in hell or something, and then he comes face to face with Batman, and I mean it's like this is the devil coming to take me away.
Right.
Yeah, and Batman is like, I got you, Red Hood, because Batman's fallen for the kayfabe. Like he thinks that the Red Hood is like this leader of a gang instead of this outfit that gets passed from like one stooge to another.
And that's like the reveal when both of those bandits are still alive and they're trying to kind of like plead with the cops. They're saying like, we're the toadies. It's the Red Hood who put us up to this, man.
Yeah, the whole reason why they have that Red Hood, so they can be, it's his fault. So Batman's like, I finally got you, Red Hood, and then Joker's freaked out. It's like, this is the devil come to punish me, and then he like backs, and then he falls like into the Ace Chemicals, ooze.
Half gainer with a twist, falls into the ooze, man, climbs his ass out. No longer like takes the Red Hood off or falls off, whatever, man. And then we see that 3-panel beat of like, we're not in Kansas anymore. Like a transition has taken place. He talks about how it's burning, whatever. And as the camera kind of pans, and we see the face, man. We got that iconic shot, man.
Yeah, with the ha 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 in the background, going, with fingers in his hair, and it's like that image, and even that sequence too. Like way before I ever read this comic, I'd seen that. That was in like magazines, and yeah, it was on posters, T-shirts. Like it was like it's this and it's this amazing image, this really striking image, and just again, like all the high points of this story are in the artwork. And so this is like the origin story of the Joker. And if like the origin of the Joker prior to this was like really like he just was swimming through the chemicals, robbing this place in his red hood, and then he takes his red hood off and, oh, I'm the Joker or whatever. Moore is the one that like turns it into like actual like real melodrama and stuff. And I think it probably hasn't been said much, but like this comic, what seems like it was a really big influence on the Batman '89 movie. Like the Joker's goons in this comic, that sort of like the guys who show up to Barbara Gordon and Jim Gordon's apartment are dressed in those like sort of like bomber jackets or whatever, like the goons in the Batman movie. And then this origin is like the origin, in that movie, it's Axis chemicals instead of Ace chemicals. And
like with the Dark Knight influence, it's more just in the pure like Art Deco visuals of the Tim Burton thing.
Right.
It's not really story stuff because it's a cheesy fucking story kind of.
Oh, the movie, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nothing story.
Yeah. The transition from the iconic Joker crazed face with the ha 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 is we are now back in Carnival Land, and James Gordon is in his cell, and all of the freaks are ha 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 ha.
Yeah, one of us.
Yeah, total gobble gobble.
And then the Batmobile pulls up, and another like showstopper image.
And this is no more transitions.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the
home stretch.
Superhero comic period, man.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta have the schmaz.
Yeah, just like the Superman annual number 11 we talked about, where it's like you gotta have the fight scene. So here's the fight scene, and it's a pretty great fight scene. I wish there was more of this in that Michael Keaton Batman movie, because like the Joker holds his own with Batman, and they have their two different styles of fighting, and the Joker's style is all about like tricks.
Yeah.
So
he's like Carrot Top. You know what I'm saying? Right. He's a prop comic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got all these gimmicks, and he yanks on Batman's cowl and pulls it over his face. It's just this really really great fight scene.
But before the fight scene starts, Batman does address he's addressing James Gordon, his friend, and he's dealing with him. And for all that has just happened to Gordon, being kidnapped, like knowing that his poor daughter got really harmed, this is the part like where James Gordon, he's holding his faculties together, and he's telling Batman he needs to come in by the book.
Yeah, do it by the book.
He needs to see that our way works.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that's another British piece, man, because they don't know how our system works here, man.
Yeah.
Now we have the fight sequence. One of the pieces of the fight sequence, when there's like the trap door, like the floor falls out, and there are those like those tiger spikes,
punji sticks or whatever.
Yeah, and you see there's like schmutz on the top of them, man. That is like turds or something.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how like punji sticks, like that's how it works, is like you put these spikes in and then you piss and shit on them so that like you get the extra
bacteria and junk like that, man. So you freaking get a paper cut with it, man, and your shit's going to be amputated. Because I say that because when I was a kid, I thought it was blood. And in both colorings, this one and the Brian Bolland, that shit ain't red, man.
Yeah, so they have their fight, and Batman wins the fight. And so then the Joker's kind of explaining what this whole experiment was. It was to show that like a bad day can make anybody like this. And you had a bad day. I had a bad day. You had a bad day. You had to have some kind of bad day to make you dress up as a rodent.
Yeah, so we're the same.
Yeah, we're the same. And Jim Gordon's one of us now, because I'm sure he's a raving lunatic right now too. And then Batman's like, well, no, it's all you. Like, this is your weakness. You can't blame your problems on anybody else, because you did all that to Jim Gordon, and he's still the same guy. Like, he hasn't.
Would you say that the Joker of this story is the mirror of Batman, as opposed to what he is to Batman in The Dark Knight Returns?
Yeah, I mean, like Alan Moore obviously has like very different like he's a very different person than Frank Miller. And he has very different ideas and very different way of working. In Miller's version, like the Joker is not Batman's mirror, but in this, they're they're presented as mirrors, and of course there's all these reflections all through this, all through this thing. And what's about to happen in the story is like is kind of where the where like their entire story, their entire history, like the entire Batman comic kind of comes to its natural conclusion. There's like the Grant Morrison theory of what this story means. And until Grant Morrison said it, it never occurred to me. I assumed like, and again, it's, I assume that this is this is like a Batman story, and he has this encounter with the Joker. And the Joker tells him this joke, this kind of ridiculous joke about the limits of insanity or whatever, and then the Joker's laughing, and then Batman looking very much like Judge Dredd, like he's so Judge Dredd in this comic, but then he gets a smirk on his face, and then he starts, and then the two of them are cracking up together and laughing. And like, yeah, you just read, and it's like, okay.
Joker puts the hand out for a shake.
Yeah, he puts out that buzzer hand or whatever, and so they share this laugh, and then the story's done. And
The bookend sequence, camera back down to the rain puddles on the ground, and you see lights approaching. You see ha 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 ha. Then you don't.
Yeah.
Then you just see the drops happening. And then it segues out of the book with the same end papers close up of the raindrops.
So like the way everybody read this story for all these years, except for Grant Morrison, was that Batman and Joker had this like brief moment of like recognition and shared a joke, and then went back to their roles afterwards, and then their story continues in like various inferior issues of Batman. And these all the things that happen in this, again, because it was post-crisis, become like permanent changes where Barbara Gordon from this point on like is wheelchair bound and becomes a different superhero. She's not Batgirl anymore. She becomes Oracle, who has like her own history and fans and things. But then Grant Morrison's theory.
Yeah, drop it off to the kayfabers that don't know.
Grant Morrison's theory is, you see, as Ed described, the sirens approach and the ha ha ha, they're both laughing together, ha 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 ha. And then the siren, the E of the siren's going at the same time. And then the ha 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 stops very abruptly. The E keeps going, and then everything stops and it's over. And so what Grant Morrison says is, in that moment, Batman just killed the Joker. Like, the Joker finally put, like, this experiment that the Joker was doing on Jim Gordon actually worked on Batman. And Batman has gone into Joker land and just killed the Joker. And it's the last Batman story ever. Like, this is the end of Batman. This is the natural conclusion of Batman. And that's why it's called The Killing Joke. I couldn't give you any explanation of why this story is called The Killing Joke, except for that, like, Grant Morrison theory about what it means. And again, when Alan Moore made this story, it was pre-crisis. So for all we know, he could have pictured himself doing like that this is the final Batman story, because they're going to reset the continuity just like I did. And the way I came up with an appropriate ending to Superman, I'm going to come up with an ending that's appropriate to Batman. And so this is the final Batman story, and Batman in that moment becomes Joker's equal. Like he does become like a murderer. And of course, Alan Moore probably couldn't tell DC that that's what he's doing, so he does it in like a very sly way, but it's there. And I
kind of like when you drew the naked Green Arrow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, you do these things like for your own reasons. And so for Alan Moore, it's like I'm gonna do the final Batman story. He's never confirmed that theory at all. And whenever Alan Moore talks about this story, he talks about it in like he's not a fan of this story. He said he was in a real bad mood around this time. He made some very grouchy comics, Watchmen being one of them, but real downer comics, but that Watchmen has some virtues to it, where to this he says it has no virtues, because he likes to make a story. It's not enough just to tell like a really good story. He wants something that you can take with you into your regular life from the story. And he said, this story is like this, it's this very in-depth examination of the Joker and the Batman and what their relationship is, but what the fuck are you going to do with that in your real life? You're never going to meet anybody like this because nobody like this exists. So to him, it's worth it. To me, like, I love a good rip-roaring story, whether it gives me, like a G.I. Joe, knowing it's half the battle.
Fun piece of escapism.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all good, in my opinion. But for him, it doesn't meet his requirements.
Just going back to something we were talking about earlier, where DC editorial just can't. They always have to have a asterisk and a disclaimer, like, with the stories, to just, like, let everybody know that they're not in canon or whatever. There is a part during the fight sequence with Batman where Joker just mentions something about having something about his past. He likes to have multiple choice. Mm-hmm. Do you know the passage?
Yeah. Well, he's saying that, like, my memories are multiple choice. So, this is a possible origin for the Joker, not necessarily the origin.
And that reeks of fucking the editorial. To me,
right? Yeah.
That's like, put this in there just so that we could hedge and say, and we always have something that we could rely on at panels, at conventions, when people ask, like, is this it's like, well, there's that one sentence where he says that his memories are multiple choice.
I mean, to me, it pays off on, like, what you were saying about it being an unreliable narrator. Like, that kind of does it. And this is something that they've clung to, like in the Dark Knight movie with Heath Ledger. Every person he meets, he tells a different harrowing origin story, a thing that makes you really feel for him. So, like, that's kind of like an extension of this too. So, I mean, maybe, like, back to that, like, Grant Morrison theory, which let's call it the Grant Morrison and Tom Scioli theory, because I agree too. Like I'm signed on. I feel like that is what this book means, and this book almost doesn't make any sense without that. Now that I really, it's just kind of like it is the throwaway puff piece that Moore calls it, without that element, and again, like the title, The Killing Joke, just doesn't mean anything. Without it means everything with that interpretation. And Alan Moore's, again, never said, oh yeah, that thing Grant Morrison said is true, and like it strikes me that his opinion, like he's not a fan of Grant Morrison just from some of the things he said. There's that thing of, like, the intentional fallacy, where, like, let's say Alan Moore comes out and says, I absolutely did not mean that. That is not how this is to be interpreted. That doesn't mean anything.
You get no choice.
Yeah.
Like, when you put a piece of work out there, man, whatever you think about what you read, that's the answer.
Yeah, like, what's on the page. And the thing that he created, this book, whatever his intentions were, whatever he was consciously thinking he was doing, the words as they are printed on this page tell the story that Grant Morrison is reading. It is there. And so you could say that, like, yeah, just like, this document is the thing that matters. What you were intending to do doesn't. But also, it's possible that your conscious mind wasn't aware that was the story you were telling. Or it could just be kayfabe. He could just be like, I don't want to give this. I don't want to tip my hand. The whole point was to make it something that you have to, like, figure out for yourself. So why in the world would I give you the answer?
Joycean complexity in Batman Killing Joke.
Yeah.
One thing that we should do is get the channel popular enough so that we can have Grant Morrison on here, incentivize him with our giant audience to have him here.
Sure.
Promote what the heck he's going to have at a certain point, and we can nail him with some questions and make him expand upon these
explain
theories.
it better than we have.
I think you did a pretty good job, man. But this is a good enough place to end it, man. This is the most thorough examination of Batman Killing Joke that's ever been done, I'm sure, at least on YouTube.
Yeah.
So let's wind down. Let's get the heck out of here, man. Kayfabers, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and follow the YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon, and it'll notify you whenever we have fresh videos available. You could support the channel by buying our comic books, or you could also support the spread shop. But grab something from the Cartoonist Kayfabe spread shop. Link in the description below. Tom, give the Kayfabers a plug.
Follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli. Or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
And all of these links are in the description of the video below. Tom and I are going to go back and add to our own comic book bibliographies, but you guys know what your marching orders are.
Read more comics.
MOORE.